Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmetullah wa barakatuhu. Draga braćo, cijene sestre, da li me čujete? Da li se čujemo, da li se vidimo? Samo mi potvrdite pa da počnemo. Allah vam dao svako dobro. Ne možemo se još vidjeti. Ovako. Da li se sad vidimo? Samo mi potvrdite da znam i idemo. Evo, odlično. Znači, danas ono što imamo u planu jeste, imamo ovdje gosta sa nama Imrana Husseina, pa ćemo sa Allahovom dozvolom sa njim popričati o nekim stvarima vezanih za ateizam i islam. Uglavnom format ove neke diskusije, rasprave, kako god da nazvali to, ovog live streama bit će da ćemo pola sata, odnosno šta ja znam, 20 ili 20 minuta do pola sata, ću ga ja ispitivati neke stvari i nakon toga daću vama priliku da vi postavite pitanje. Je li u redu to? Znači, nadam se slažemo, pa ću ja sa Allahovom dozvolom odmah početi, pošto smo ograničeni vremenom, samo 1 sat imamo sa njim, pa tako da hajde odmah da pređemo na stvar. So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu, dear Imran. So could you just say hello to my public so that...
Assalamu alaikum and hello to everyone that's not Muslim. Welcome to Brother Alim's live stream, mashallah.
So can you hear him, guys? Is it possible to hear him? So just to check all the technicalities so we can have the lift off.
Yes, inshallah.
Okay. Okay, so basically tonight, I mean, in this this short live stream, we're going to discuss some stuff about atheism and Islam. So my first question, I mean, out of the blue, is basically, what is atheism? How do we define it? And what's so special about it?
Okay, so in a nutshell, bro, atheism is it's defined in many ways. You can call it an ideology, you can call it a worldview, you can call it a way of life, you can call it just a simple belief or a viewpoint. There's many ways atheists would refer to atheism, but generally speaking, if you go by a dictionary definition, atheism is the idea that there is no God, there is no creator. That they believe that affirmatively that there is no creator that created everything that exists. And therefore, in other words, what they're saying essentially is that everything in existence, the universe, us as human beings, and everything that exists is a result of just random physical processes. Everything is one big accident, essentially.
So,
life,
would you? Did you want to add something also?
No. That's
okay,
it.
so that's it basically. I mean, do you agree with the notion? I mean, that atheism, or the idea of atheism, is something new in the modern era, and also that it's growing. Do you agree with these two?
Very good question. The first question is a very interesting question. Firstly, it's not something new. Atheism has been around for, as far back as you want to look. There's been some form of atheism, like even as far back as the 15th and 16th centuries. There were reports of individuals who you would call atheists, but we need to remember that atheism as a term has been used in many different ways historically. So at one point in history, atheism, some Christians would refer to other Christian sects and groups as atheists because they wouldn't have orthodox beliefs. So atheism was used in a slightly different context back then. But today, when we say atheism, the general meaning of atheism is the type of new atheism, which is the denial of a creator, a God, and that claim. But historically speaking, there were many ways the term atheism was used. And in regards to the second claim, is it growing? It was popular, and I refer to it in the past tense. It was popular. If you go maybe a decade back, 5 to 10 years back, it was popular. There was a bit of a blip as far as its popularity was concerned, but I think currently, today, 2020, it's starting to die down. That sort of traditional if you like, classical new atheism, that the type that's promoted by Richard Dawkins, is dying out now very quickly.
And what's the reason for that?
Well, I think one of the predominant reasons is because it's averse to human nature. It doesn't fit the human being. Human beings intrinsically are spiritual beings. We are beings that live with meaning. Everything about our existence, we see things through the lens of meaning. And that's exactly what atheism removes from you as a human being. It removes all meaning. We're ethical creatures. We're moral creatures. And again, atheism removes that from you. It removes any sort of objective standpoint of morality from you as a human being. Everything becomes subjective. So I think those two predominant reasons, and just generally that atheism, the whole idea that there is no creator, that everything is an accident, is very averse to human nature. We as human beings recognize that we have intrinsic meaning, that there is some significance to our existence, and we recognize that we're spiritual and we need to express this. But atheism doesn't allow us to do this. And this is why, bro, we see this new trend of atheism, the type that's been pushed by Sam Harris, which is a spiritual type of atheism now, or spirituality on atheism. That's why he wrote the book, Waking Up, and he's got even an app now, a paid app that he is very popular, and loads of atheists are now moving towards that. And also, bro, one thing was very interesting before I finish on this point is that we're seeing a movement of atheists towards a new type of existentialism, meaning the type of ideologies that's been promoted by people like what's his name? Very famous speaker and professor, Jordan Peterson, for example.
Yeah,
a lot of atheists are turning towards him, and that's why
But he's not an atheist, basically.
No, he isn't.
No.
Yeah, but you could say he's Christian, but he's not very outwardly about his views in regards to religion. He's more about how we should live our lives with meaning and purpose, and how we should deal with suffering. So he deals with really practical existential things. But I think that's what's really popular about him. And I think the reason he's gained so much popularity is because you have a lot of people that previously associated with atheism or Richard Dawkins and all of these atheists are now moving towards him because they get from him what they couldn't get from Dawkins and the atheists.
Wow, really? I mean, that's crazy, because a lot of atheists basically that write comments on my YouTube channel basically say that atheism is the natural disposition. It's basically the natural position, and that belief is acquired. You wouldn't agree with this?
No, it's not only me, bro. I mean, if you look at all of the research that's been coming forward, individuals that study this field of how belief is hardwired into human beings, or is it hardwired into human beings? Justin L. Barrett is a very good resource. He's written a book called Born Believers, and he has several other books on this topic. You have Olivera Petrovich. She, as far as I'm aware, she is an atheist. And both of them, as well as many other individuals or professors who study child psychology in particular, focusing in on the belief in God, one thing they highlight is that the belief in God is natural. It's built in, it's hardwired into the human being. Now, the conclusion they come to based on this reality, like how they now summarize this reality, or what conclusions they come to based on this. Some of them may say, well, it's because of evolution, etc., etc. But that's not the point. The point is that belief is natural to human beings, right? And atheism is unnatural. How you want to understand this is a different story. How you want to take this data now and interpret it is a different story. But if you look at the data, the raw data suggests that belief is natural and atheism is unnatural.
I mean, someone asked here, do you think that atheism is growing or was growing because many Christians could not understand the Trinity in the Bible?
That's a very intelligent question, mashallah, and that is true. Even on my channel recently on epistemics, this is something I've been recently looking into, because look, what fascinates me is atheism in and of itself is very weak. Its foundations are very, very weak. So it makes you think then, well, why is atheism even around today? Why is it even popular to the level it's popular? It's not that popular, but to whatever degree it's popular. And the reason is because you have to sort of understand the history here. If you look at the pre-modern era prior to the Enlightenment period, and this is very relevant to Europe, especially the places we all live in, you would see that pre-modern Europe was occupied and run and governed by Christianity. Christianity ruled every aspect of life, whether it was education, commerce, law. It covered everything. It branched over everything. And one of the things that Christianity, or one of the problematic aspects of Christianity, was that it didn't like the idea of reason and rationality. And what's very interesting, without going into too much detail, when people like Thomas Aquinas looked at the Muslim world and he saw the likes of Ibn Sina and all of these other individuals, one thing he noticed that Islam managed to have this beautiful union between reason and revelation. It had this very beautiful balance between the two. So Thomas Aquinas, being one of the individuals, tried to make this balance between Christianity and reason too, but he couldn't. And the reason he failed was because their most fundamental doctrines, bro, their most fundamental beliefs, such as the belief in the Trinity, go against reason. You can't rationally explain these things. So he failed. And this is why you had other Christian theologians, such as, for example, Martin Luther, a Protestant theologian from I think the 15th or 16th century. And these are his words. He referred to reason as a whore, right? And he was very sort of explicit and aggressive towards reason and rationality. And he rejected it. He called it the greatest enemy of religion. So Christianity generally as a whole rejected reason and rationality. And this created a schism. It created this agitation, which then later developed into the period of enlightenment, where now reason was up for grabs, right? So because Christians rejected it. Now there was free thinkers who grabbed onto reason and rationality and ran with it. And this was natural because rationality and reason is a part of the human being. It's a faculty that we've been blessed with. If you can't reject it, I mean, it's a part of what makes us human. So during the Enlightenment period, there was a rebellion, which really came out in the shape of the French Revolution, etc. And you had the thinkers. Christians obviously persecuted these free thinkers and these early scientists, but they rebelled. And then you had the Enlightenment period where they moved away from the dogmas of Christianity, and they took hold of Greek thought and Greek reason and rationality. But what they did was interesting. They successfully, to some degree, managed to have a mix of reason and rationality and religion. They took the good things they needed to take from Christianity, the Judeo-Christian tradition, and I would say Islam as well, in regards to the sort of moral foundations and existential foundations, and they combined it with reason and rationality, and they moved forward. And what one of their primary focuses was, and the history is very interesting, but we don't have time to go into it here. One of their primary focuses was to take the human being and take the human focus away from the hereafter, and to get them to focus on the dunya, the material world, right? Because they wanted to sort of disassociate as much as they could from religion, in particular Christianity. So they wanted to take the human being from focusing on paradise, that's in the next life, to focusing on a paradise on earth. They wanted human beings to focus on a utopian future. So this environment now was the perfect environment for atheism to rise in. And not only rise in, but atheism was also as a way of life, which also focuses on, or says that there is no God, there is no creator. It also gets you, or helps you in focusing on the material world. So it goes hand in hand with these other ideologies, this sort of modern and postmodern, these modern and postmodern ideologies that literally cover the earth today, and what most people follow and believe in. So it's like atheism is that perfect hat that fits this head, the postmodern and modern head, and that's why it still exists, is because it's in line with all of these other ideologies. Would
you also say that, I mean, today it's being so widespread because of the media? I mean, when you mentioned, for example, Jordan Peterson, I heard one of his talks. I mean, he spoke about, you know, when you look at all of these Marvel movies, basically, I mean, he basically said it's polytheism all over again. This was his comment basically on it. I mean, but when you look at the Marvel movies, I mean, like Thor, Hulk, I mean, I don't know, other, I mean, you can basically, you know, basically they promote atheism, you know. Yeah, I mean, it is basically a promotion of you know, godless societies and so on.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, bro. Majority of the things we see, because remember, media, you know, back in the day,
and also I mean, and also just to, you know, add something to it, and also if you, for example, because the society has become basically so hedonistic. I mean, everyone is just following his own desires, and this is something that basically, I mean, it's popular, and religion restrict human behavior basically.
Absolutely, bro. Look, if you look at the whole picture, everything is getting people, the world that we live in is getting people to focus on the material world. That's where they want the focus to be, bro. It's money governs everything, right?
Yeah, but it really does not, I mean, it doesn't bring you happiness, because I saw a lot of studies, I mean, that were done, that basically say that once you reach a certain amount of money, I mean, you are as likely to be miserable as other people. I mean, it really does not bring you happiness.
Absolutely. This actually, you reminded me of a brilliant book that if anyone gets the chance to read, definitely read. It's called The High Price of Materialism by Tim Kassa. He makes exactly this point, which is, there's only a certain level of or amount of wealth, quote unquote, wealth people need to live a happy life, and anything in surplus of this is just insignificant and irrelevant. If anything, this sort of excessive materialism leads to a poorer quality of life. It destroys relationships. It destroys family structures. It destroys social structures. It's detrimental in every way, shape, or form. And that's, if we see it's the world that we live in, bro. These are the problems we're facing today. Social structures are breaking down. People are becoming individualistic. People are becoming God. Especially now, especially the era that we live in now, post 20th century, bro. This postmodern mentality, which is there is no absolute truth. There is no absolute meaning. The individual defines what's right and wrong. The individual chooses to interpret reality in the way they want to interpret reality. It's just all a big mess now, and what's happening is that people are slowly waking up and realizing there has to be more to life than just this, like you said, this hedonistic way of living, which is just about me and making sure that I'm feeling pleasure at every moment of my existence. And to do that, I focus on the material world. They know this has to be more to life than this. And people are slowly starting to wake up. And this is why I really encourage people to look into Islam, because most people, unfortunately, don't look into Islam because of all this negative media propaganda that's out in regards to Islam. Most people never get to hear about the truth of Islam, especially the truth, bro, which is relevant to our existence today, such as in regards to the meaning of life. Who are we? Why are we here? What's the purpose of our existence? You're not going to find the answers to these questions on atheism or naturalism. You're not going to find them from any postmodern philosopher or modern philosopher. They don't have a clue. They can never give you the answer to these. All they can do is they can create this false paradigm where they want you to believe and push the idea that success in this life means to gain as much material possessions as you can. That's the American dream. That's all they want to push. That's all they could do. And they've got people in this, they've got people plugged in, bro. It's like in the Matrix. If you've seen the Matrix, we're literally living the Matrix where people are plugged in and people are put in this sleep, in this trance. And they've been sold this false idea. But slowly people are unplugging themselves and realizing, there's more to I'm going to die one day. And death is a reality. And I, as a conscious human being that feels and that's aware that he or she is alive and is rational and can think about these things and can think about his or her own existence, such people are waking up and realizing there has to be more than life than just these ideas that have been sold.
Okay, I mean, when you already mentioned the purpose of life, I mean, if someone were to ask you what is the purpose of life, what would be? I mean, why are we here, basically?
So let me pre-frame it like this first. As human beings, when we look at our nature, we recognize a few things. We have an affinity. We have this inclination to submit to and worship something or the other, right? All of us do. All of us want to submit to something. All of us want something to occupy our hearts, right? We feel an emptiness inside, and we normally fill this through materialistic things, sometimes through other people, sometimes through other ideologies, whatever the case is, right? It's just a part of our nature. We're looking for something. We're looking to find ourselves and our true meaning. Now, when it comes to Islam, Islam provides and comprehensively addresses this problem. Allah in the Quran, fundamentally, first and foremost, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God says in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that He did not create the human being and the jinn kind, but let's focus on the human beings right now. He did not create the human being for no reason other than that we were created to worship Him, to know Him and to worship Him. right? Now, when we say worship, just for our non-Muslim friends that may be listening, worship, because sometimes worship from a Western European perspective, it has negative connotations, the word worship and servitude and submission and slavery. But worship and slavery in Islam is something beautiful because it's something that truly frees you. What Islam is telling us, or what God is telling us through Islam, is that if you submit yourself to God, meaning you focus on God and you do what God wants you to do, and you try in your life to develop a relationship with your Creator, and you try to live in a way where you're trying to please God and you're not trying to please anyone else. By doing this, you will find true freedom, true liberation. This is what worship is in Islam, and worship is comprehensive. So every moment of your waking life could be a form of worship, right? From brushing your teeth in the morning to going and help an old lady cross the road, to giving charity. It's all worship. If you're doing it with the consciousness of your Creator, then that becomes worship as well, right? And that's how beautiful worship is in Islam. And what's even more profound, bro, about worshiping God is that, think about it this way. It's a part of our nature, like we said already, to submit to something and to worship something. Well, the question that a rational person needs to ask themselves is, what would you rather worship? Would you rather worship something created, something ephemeral, something that's as weak as you? Or would you rather worship the creator of everything that exists? That's the real question. And I would say that the rational, intelligent person would make the decision of worshiping the creator over worshiping anything else. And when you worship the creator of the heavens and the earth, you are fulfilling the purpose of your existence, and you therefore will find peace and tranquility in this life, that very thing that you're looking for so desperately. Everything we run after in this world, if you ask the why question like children ask, why, everything and anything people are running after ultimately is because they want to be happy. They want to feel tranquil. They want to find peace. They want to feel a sense of stability and calm in their hearts and in their minds, but they're not going to find that in anything except in the worship of God. So when you worship God and you fulfill the purpose of your life, you will find that peace and tranquility that you're looking for. And not only that, bro, you will find what you so desire in this world in the eternal life. Because once we die, then the decision is going to be made as to where we go. Is it paradise or is it the hellfire? And you will get eternal paradise if you do that. So there's everything to gain and nothing to lose by submitting to God and worshiping Him alone. You find yourself, and by worshiping God, you're elevated as a human being because you're not a slave to created things anymore. You're not a slave to other people. You're not a slave to money. You're not a slave to materialism. You're not a slave to yourself. You're free. If you want to be free, truly be free. And this is a concept that really would resonate with the people today. We're all chasing freedom, we're all chasing liberation. You're never going to find that in this world. You're always going to be a slave to something or the other, or yourself. The only way you're going to be free is when you submit to God. And that's the only time you'll really be free from this world and yourself. So I think submission to God in Islam is a truly liberating concept, bro, and it's something that the world needs.
Okay, great. The questions are basically pouring in, so I'm going to just read some of them. So one of the people said, so one person said, why? I assume that this is a question from a non-believer, non-religious, as they say. So he says, why there needs to be a purpose of life?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way I would address a person who asks the question why there needs to be a purpose, I would say, well, look at your life. Our lives are testament to the fact that we're purpose-driven creatures. Everything we do, think about it, from waking up in the morning to going to bed at night, everything is purpose-driven, bro.
Yeah.
Why do we get up in the morning? It's so that we can get dressed. Why do we get dressed? So we can go to work. Why do we go to work? So we can earn a living. Why do we want to earn a living? Because we want to have a good life. Everything is purpose-driven. Every single thing. Not only this, bro, when we look at the world around us, the material, physical world, we see things through the eyes of purpose. We ascribe purpose to things.
Mm-hmm.
When we make things as human beings, bro, we make things with purpose. This is enough evidence that we are purpose-driven creatures. When it comes to our own lives, we live searching for purpose. If we can't find purpose, we make purpose up. This is why you had movements such as the existentialist movements, in the 19th and 20th century, because these were philosophers who were trying to answer the bigger questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? If there wasn't a need for this, they wouldn't have arisen. And this, it's a part of human nature to ask, who am I and why am I here? What's my purpose? And what they suggested was, well, there is no purpose to life and you make it up. And this is what we see atheists doing. If you ask an atheist, what's the purpose of your life? If they're honest, they will say, well, there is no ultimate purpose, but because I'm a purpose-driven creature and I need purpose, I'll make up purpose for myself. And my purpose, some of them will say, my purpose is to be a good person. My purpose is to be a humanist. My purpose is to do charity work. My purpose is to just live a life full of pleasure, live a hedonistic life. They'll give themselves purpose. So I think the question itself is with respect, I think it's a question which is, it's an unnecessary question because our very existence says otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, really, I don't have anything to say regarding this because you're right. I mean, the human being is basically the only being that asks these kind of questions. I mean, when you look at an animal, I mean, it does all of the things. I mean, it's instinctively. I mean, it doesn't do it like a person would do it, right? I mean, because you can choose also not to eat, for example. You don't have to eat. Right? You can choose what type of food you can eat, right? Depending on your purpose, what you want to achieve. I mean, that's a really good argument. So one person said,
I mean, here's a little experiment people could do, right? If they really want to understand this, tell yourself, just sit down in a corner for a second, or in your room maybe, and just tell yourself, I have no purpose. My life has no purpose, and just see how that feels. You will realize you can't move forward. You can't continue to live if you take that type of outlook. For us to continue to live, we have to live with purpose. You can't escape this. Whether you make it up or whether you find your true purpose, those are two different things. That's a different story. But nevertheless, our existence is purpose-driven. You can't escape this.
So one person said something like this. I mean, it's a comment from an atheist, basically. He said, it's not that there is no absolute truth. It's that no person has sufficient reason to claim to have the absolute truth, and you should be suspicious of anyone who does. So, I mean,
so it's generally speaking, it's a good point. But what we need to realize is that there's a level of skepticism that's reasonable, right? So obviously, we live in times where people question everything, but unfortunately, one thing we need to understand: it's not bad to be skeptical about certain things, right? Or let's not call it skeptical. It's not bad to question things and to make sure you're believing in the right things. This is a good thing. This is something natural to human beings. But when atheists say, for example, okay, you believe in Islam, you believe in the Quran, well, what's the proof? Fine, it's good to ask for proof. But the problem is, bro, when most atheists ask for proof, they're asking for a certain type of proof.
Yeah, empirical evidence, basically.
Exactly. But the issue is, bro, is that, see, the thing is, unfortunately, we've been conditioned to think in certain ways. For example, seeing is believing. This is something that's drilled into our heads through education all our lives, right? But what we need to understand is that there's many routes to knowledge. There's many ways of coming to truth. Many of the things that we believe in, like I would ask everyone that's watching this right now, think about the things that you believe in. Now, once you think about those things, ask yourself how many of those things that you believe in are based on empirical data. And you'll be surprised to find not many of them, right? For example, most of us believe our parents are our parents. But the funny thing is, most of us haven't done DNA tests. We haven't got empirical data for that. What we have is testimony, which is another authentic route to knowledge. So we have to appreciate that, yeah, sure, science is a good method, empiricism is a good method to understand the material physical world, but there are other realities in existence. And science isn't the only way to truth. There are many routes to truth. So when it comes to, for example, the question of God is beyond science. God is beyond the material physical existence. So how can you empirically validate God? You can't. But are there rational reasons to believe in God's existence? Absolutely. There's some very powerful rational arguments for God's existence. Are there good, strong arguments for the case that the Quran is from God? Absolutely they are. But you have to have an open mind and realize that science, can't tell you about everything. There are other routes to knowledge. So be flexible with the routes you choose in regards to the reality that you're observing. That's a key thing we need to understand.
So basically one question here is about what's the purpose of revelation?
A very good question. So, for example, let's look at it from the perspective of the Quran in particular. God tells us that the Quran, or God tells us a few things about the Quran. Some things that we can mention here is, number one, God tells us it's guidance. It's guidance for humanity, and in particular, it's guidance for those people of taqwa. Taqwa meaning God consciousness or awareness of God. Those that fear God, but not fear God as far as seeing Him as an evil monster or something. No, but fear displeasing God, fear being on the wrong side of God. Right. So it's people that are conscious of their Creator in particular, but it's guidance for humanity. Whoever wants to access it, whoever wants to tend to it. So the purpose of revelation, one of the predominant purposes of revelation, is for our guidance. And if anything, this is the mercy of God. This is the mercy of God that He sends guidance to us to help guide us to the right path. Because remember, I think what's beautiful about this, bro, is we have to first, I think, look at what life is, right? Most people don't think about this because, from the atheist perspective, what is life? Life is just an accident, right? And for some reason, we end up believing that life is supposed to be paradise, that we're here to have fun, we're here to enjoy ourselves. But this is not the case. What does God say about life? God says life, He created life and death to test which of us is best in deeds. So life is a test. We're here to be tested. And that explains the sort of, if you quote unquote, irrational aspect of reality. For example, we don't see justice, we see evil, we see suffering. That explains this because God's told us we'll be tested by many different things. So understanding that life is a test and understanding that He created us to worship Him, well, we need to find we need to sort of discover how to best navigate this life and how to best pass the test of this life. We're not going to be able to figure all of these things out ourselves. So we need revelation, we need guidance, we need direction. Sure, we have what we call the fitra as Muslims, which is this innate disposition, this innate belief, like we spoke about already, the belief in God being natural. That's a part of our nature, but for it to be completed, we need revelation. Without revelation, we won't really understand how to fully direct ourselves in this life and how to find our way and to be successful in this life. So out of the mercy of God, He sent revelation, and not only over 1400 years ago to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but God sent revelation throughout history, from when man first stepped foot on this earth. And He's been sending revelation throughout history to humanity for their guidance. And this highlights the mercy of our Creator, how loving and merciful God is.
Would you agree that it would be also irrational to believe, for example, that God created this universe and He just left it, without any revelation, without revealing anything about Himself? That would be also, irrational. It would be basically ungodly, if I can say it like that.
Absolutely. So look, there is a conception there. Or there's an idea that, okay, some atheists may come to the point, well, there is a creator, there's a God, but He's not a personal being. He's not a being that interacts with His creation and can have a relationship with human beings. They would say He's a type of a mechanical being that created everything, put everything in motion, and then left it alone, right? Like you said, bro, it's that concept just intuitively and naturally and even rationally, it's not befitting of God. What it shows of God is that God is a very cold being that doesn't care about His creation. That's not just, that's not loving, that's not merciful. He just allows the creatures that exist to do whatever they want and be whichever way they want and end up in hell and whatever the case is. He doesn't care. This is not befitting of God, because if you think about us limited human beings, bro, we have care and concern. So for example, I'll give you a simple analogy, bro. I think this will push the point home. When we make products, bro, we provide manuals, right? So whenever we make products, I don't know if you have IKEA in
yes.
You have IKEA, yeah? IKEA. So whenever you go IKEA, you buy a cupboard, you buy a sofa, you buy something, and it always comes with a manual, right? Why do designers provide manuals? Is because they have the compassion and concern for the user. So when the user buys their product, that the user knows how to use it, how to put it together, how to take care of it, how to make sure that they get the most out of it, etc., etc. That's us limited human beings. If we have such concern that we provide manuals, what about the creator of the heavens and the earth who created us? Why wouldn't He provide us with guidance? Surely He would. The one that's taken care of our most trivial needs, right? And these needs are quite trivial. For example, the one that provides us shelter, the one that provides us clothing, the one that provides us food, the one that provides us loved ones and families, etc. Wouldn't He provide for our guidance? The thing that we need the most in this life to be successful? Of course He would. It just doesn't make any sense that He wouldn't provide that for us.
Okay. Someone asked, when discussing the subject of moral values with atheists, how to convey the message of objective morality in the most convenient way?
Okay, this is a topic in itself. We could probably do another live stream on
Yeah,
this,
I said no. No.
but just quickly, I think 2 points here. Number one, atheists would sometimes, I'll give you Richard Dawkins as a perfect example of this. Richard Dawkins would attack religion, he would attack Islam, he would say this is bad, this is wrong, this is evil. However, if you were to question him, how do you ground your morality? Meaning, what's your anchor? How do you know what's objectively right and what's objectively wrong? He doesn't have an anchor. In his new book, I don't have it here, but his new book, Outgrowing God, in the chapter on morality, he discusses morality, and he basically boils it down to this. It's just something in the air. It's something that evolves and changes over time. So therefore, in other words, it's something that's subjective, subject to time, subject to the ideas of human beings, subject to society. And if it's subjective, then there's no objective reality to it. And therefore, you can't make objective claims against religion. So when you say Islam is bad because of X, well, you're just basing that from your subjective standpoint. And therefore, what you're saying has no value. It's pointless. Whether you say it or not makes no difference. Your views in regards to something moral are it's empty, it's void, it's meaningless, right? Essentially. So one thing we need to highlight to atheists is that on atheism, you don't have a claim to objective moral values and duties. You can't account for them. Morality, if everything is an accident, right? Because remember, there is no God, there is no creator. Therefore, everything that exists is one big accident. And therefore, us human beings are a part of that accident. And therefore, our moral faculties or moral outlooks are also accidental, right? There's nothing objective about them. There's nothing truthful about them. There's no truth to them. It's just our subjective opinions, our subjective views. If anything, bro, you will have to boil morals down to biology, or you have to reduce it down to biology. That's the best you can do in atheism. That morals evolved through, just evolved with us. And if that's the case, well, then they're subject to evolution. And therefore, there's nothing truthful about them, or good or bad or right or wrong about them. They just something morally good from an evolutionary point of view is whatever is conducive to survival. That's good, and whatever is not conducive to survival is bad, right? So I mean, you could just start to imagine the type of atrocities you can justify under that type of outlook. It's highly problematic.
Okay. The next question is basically it's a comment, but I mean, he put a question mark at the end. So he said, atheists say that science is against God. Question mark.
It's a false idea people are pushing. Science is a method. It's a method of inquiry. It's a method of study. Science is not a ideology. It's not something that's for or against religion. For or against God. It's just a method that we human beings use to study the material physical world. However, what's happened in the recent centuries is that the materialists and the naturalists have taken hold of the method and have tried to use it and monopolize it and use it against religious people and God. And they've tried to claim it. But the method itself is neutral, bro. The Muslims were scientists. Some of the greatest scientists in history were Muslims. If you look at Islamic Spain and the period of the Golden Age, as it's referred to, if it wasn't for the Muslims, bro, we wouldn't have the sciences that we have today in the world. We wouldn't have this progress. We probably wouldn't have the theory of evolution, if you really think about it. Because what the Muslims did was that they took the works of the Greeks, and they translated it, and they preserved it, and they worked on it, and they developed it. And then individuals from other parts of Europe came over, took the stuff, and they took it to the rest of Europe and opened universities and continued the sciences. So if Islam was against religion, if Islam was against science, or hated science or said science is bad, then you wouldn't see this. If anything, I mean, the Quran is the root to this. If you read the Quran, you will see that God encourages you to use your faculties, to study the world, to observe the world. Allah says in the Quran, do you not see the camels and how they were created? What's God telling us to do here? He's telling us to observe, to see. He tells us to travel the lands and to see the previous civilizations. Again, this is observations, a part of science. Allah says in the Quran that He brought us out of our mother's wombs, not knowing anything, and then He gave us what? He gave us our senses, hearing and sight, and the af'idata, meaning the intellect, rational faculties, so that we can understand what we're studying. Why? So that we may be grateful. So, if anything, God gave us the ability, and He outlines this in the Quran. He gave us the ability to do what we call science today, but for a reason, so that we can study the world. And when we study the world, we will see the signs of God. And when we see the signs of God, this will turn us towards our Creator and make us grateful to Him, so we can thank Him. And this is what happens, bro. When a sincere individual looks at the universe and what the scientists are telling us about the universe, it blows your mind. Look at the fine-tuning that the scientists are telling us about. When you look at the fine-tuning of the universe, when you look at the laws of the universe, you can't help but acknowledge the Creator. And this is why Antony Flew, one of the most eminent atheist philosophers, bro, one of the biggest atheist philosophers of the past century, Antony Flew, he's got a book, There Is a God. Near the end of his life, bro, he left atheism. He became a believer in a creator. He didn't become a theist. However, I'm sure if he had lived on for another 15, 20 years, he maybe would have become a theist. But he became a believer in a creator based on these very things. The laws of the universe, the order of the universe, and a few other things.
Okay. So next question is... someone said, why would Allah create people knowing that some would use their free will to land themselves in the hellfire? Would it not have been better for Allah to just avoid creating these people altogether?
So there's 2 points to this. The first thing I want us to appreciate is a general foundational point. One of the biggest problems we have as Muslims, and non-Muslims, but Muslims in particular here I'm speaking to, is when it comes to Islam, what we end up doing is we approach Islam with this postmodern mindset. And therefore, we think that we can question Allah, that we can understand Allah's intent, that we can understand everything Allah understands. Now, if that was the case, then there will be no difference between us and God from that respect. And therefore, that would be problematic, right? We have to remember we're limited human beings and we only know so much, right? So when it comes to, for example, the question of, why did Allah create us? Or why did Allah create certain people? Well, Allah tells us He created us to know Him and to worship Him. And He created us with free will so we can, and He created us with faculties, our rational faculties. He created us with a heart. He created us conscious so that we can use these in the right way and turn to Him and worship Him. And when we do this with free will, this is an opportunity for us to attain a level higher than the angels. So look at it from the positive perspective too. But if you use it in the wrong way, well, then that will land you and put you in a level lower than the animals. And that's justified from that perspective. Now, if you were to ask, well, why would Allah do even this? Why would He create us with this free will, etc.? Well, then first thing I would say is there are certain things that are beyond us. And as limited human beings, we would never understand everything, right? And this is why we have to understand what we can understand. And therefore, there's certain things we can understand, which are certain names and attributes of Allah. If we understand that Allah is Qa'iman bil Qist, He is established upon justice. He's firm upon justice. If Allah is Ar-Rahman, Rahim, if we understand this, He is the most merciful. If Allah is Al-Wadud, He is the most loving. If we understand these realities, we know Allah will not do injustice to anyone. There is no injustice in any of the plan of Allah, right? And this is, if we can understand this, then the other things which are beyond us, that we just put our trust in Allah, we submit and we obey, right? We know enough. But what we end up doing is we end up falling into the trap that Shaitan fell into. Right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Shaitan to bow down to Adam out of respect, the angels did it immediately. But what did Shaitan do? Shaitan didn't bow down to Adam. And when Allah asked him why he didn't do this, what was his response? Oh, I'm better than him. He's made of this, I'm made of this. He was rationalizing with God. He was debating with God. And by doing so, what he was saying, in other words, God, I know better than you. That's why I'm not going to bow down to Adam. And this is the same trap he's making us fall into. So one of the key pieces of advice I give Muslims is, look, there's a limit. There's so much we know. Once we get to that point, the most rational thing to do is submit, right? Simple example or analogy I can give you here is when you're sick, when you got a fever, when you got a flu or a cold or something wrong with you, who do you go to? Do you go to the doctor or do you go to the mechanic? I mean, obviously, if people were to answer this, they would say they go to the doctor. So your rational faculties will take you to the doctor. Now, when you get to the doctor and you tell the doctor your symptoms and the doctor prescribes you medication, what do you do at that point? Do you A, put your feet up on the table and start arguing with the doctor? Or B, do you take the prescription, take the medication and go home? Most of us, the most rational person, would take the medication and go home. Why? Because he understands or she understands the doctor is the authority. Your rational faculties have taken you to the one that knows best. Now, the most rational thing to do is submit to him and obey him, right? Atheists do this when they're on a plane and there's turbulence on a plane and the pilot tells you fasten your seatbelts. What do? We fasten our seatbelts. We don't jump up and say, why? Explain this to me. No, we don't do this. See, the most rational thing to do is to realize the limits of your rational faculties and to submit. But unfortunately, sometimes what we end up doing is we cross those limits and we go into dangerous territory, which is not helpful. So when it comes to certain things, Allah's given us the understanding of them. Now, when it comes to trying to fully understand why Allah did it in this way and why this, that, and the other, it's beyond us. We will never understand certain things. But we have to rest assured that our Creator is the most merciful, He's the most just, and He's made everything perfect. And He's given us the opportunity in this life to know Him and to worship Him. And if we do this or try to even do this, there's such a great reward to be had. So why not focus on that and do that instead of not doing that or worrying about why this plan's in place, right? That's not for us. Right? I mean, if someone, for example, bro, and this is a very interesting analogy, if someone was to imagine you fall asleep right now and you wake up and you're on the edge of a cliff and you got chains around your body and there's a man standing right in front of you and he takes the key, there's a padlock, he locks it, the chain, so your hands are tied like this, and he puts the key in your pocket and he pushes you into the water. And when you fall into the water, you realize there's shark in the water, right? You see the shark fins just swimming around in the water. What are you going to do at that point? Are you going to know what you know and take the key out of your pocket and try to unlock yourself and get out of the water? Or are you going to start to question the guy that's on top of the cliff? Why did you throw me in here? You know, why would you do this, etc., etc.? You're not going to do that. You're not going to waste time. You're going to do what you can to get out of the water. We're here. We have 50, 60 years of this life. God has given us everything we need to find the truth and to live in a way that will allow us to be successful. But why waste time in delving into areas that are things that are beyond us? Why not focus on what we need to focus on?
Very good.
Sorry, I know I went off on a bit of a tangent, but I think it's a very important thing to understand.
No, it's very important. I mean, because such questions are very, very, you know, I mean, they're basically abundant. You know, when I look at my comment section, I'm very happy that someone basically asked something like this. I mean, so we can address it. There's also some other, you know, questions like his book recommendations on philosophy.
Okay, book recommendations. I would say Hamza's book, The Divine Reality. I've got a copy of it, I think, here. Yep. So this book is a brilliant book to read, guys, inshallah. So it's The Divine Reality by Hamza Dorses. This is probably the first book I'll recommend everyone to read, because it covers pretty much everything as far as arguments for and against God, arguments for and against atheism, Islam, how Islam, you know, makes sense of the human condition, etc. It's a very, very good book. Another really good book that I've recently finished is this book. It's called Rethinking Islam in the West, by an author called Ahmed Paul Keller. It's a very good sort of summary on the history of the world over the past 500 years and how it sort of, how when it moved away from God, it landed itself into the problems that we find ourselves in today, and how Islam is the solution to these things. That's another very, very good book to read. Other than that, bro, to be honest, nothing else is coming to mind which I'll particularly recommend.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
Those two are probably good for now, inshallah.
So someone asked, what's the difference between atheism and agnosticism?
Okay. Let me give you a bit more than to these two categories. One thing we should really appreciate and understand, so we are fair to atheists as well, is that there is not one type of atheism or one type of disbelief. You have. Okay, let's go through the spectrum. So on the far left, you have what you would call mesotheism, right? Mesotheism basically is a type of hardline atheism or naturalism with a strong hatred towards God. So these individuals not only deny God, but they hate God. It's called mesotheism or mesotheism. It's one of the two. I don't know how it's pronounced. Then you have hard naturalism. Okay. Naturalism meaning that naturalists, what they believe is that there is all that exists is physical. There is nothing beyond the physical. No supernatural, no divine, nothing else, right? And even if there was something, it has nothing to do with the physical material world. Okay, so that's naturalism, generally speaking. Then you would have atheism. Now, atheism is a bit more softer than naturalism. Most atheists are naturalists, but some atheists would leave the door open. So they will leave the door open to, and they may say, well, yeah, there is no God, there is no theistic conception of God, but there may be something there. There may be some sort of energy, there may be some sort of power, there may be some sort of, I don't know, smoke, I don't know what you want to call it, but there may be something beyond the material. So the naturalist says there's nothing beyond the material. The atheist says there may be something beyond the material which does interact with this material physical existence, right? Then you would, down the line towards the right, you would have agnostics, or someone that's an agnost, someone that is on the fence, as we say in the UK, someone that's sitting on the fence. He's neither on this side or on that side. They're just like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying there isn't a God, but I'm not saying there is a God. I'm undecided, right? And that's most common people would be agnostic today, I would say. And then you would also get another subdivision in agnosticism. You get a subcategory which would be agnostics which are interested and agnostics which are uninterested. So when you speak to them, some agnostics are really interested in this question, but others just can't care. They're just too busy with life and don't have the time to engage in these questions and these thoughts.
Okay, great. Why should we pray to God? I think that this is from an atheist, this question. He says, why should we pray to God if he gave us free will? So basically we can't control us. So basically he can't control us. He made a rule for himself to live us alone. I don't know what he wanted to say, but basically the question is, why should we pray to God if he gave us free will?
You're right. You don't have to pray to God. No one has to pray to God. So one thing from the Islamic perspective that becomes clear is God is free of need. God doesn't need anyone to pray to him. Even if every single thing in creation was to turn away from God and not worship God, it doesn't detract from God in any way, shape, or form. And if everyone was to worship God in the most perfect way possible, it does not add to God's majesty in any way, shape, or form. God is free of any need. However, he did create us to worship him. So if we worship him and we pray to him out of our free will, if we choose to do so, we are the ones that are going to benefit, not God. God is not going to benefit from our prayers. God is not going to benefit from our worship. Mm-hmm. We are going to benefit. And that's something we need the atheists to think sometimes, and they're not to blame for this, bro. Sometimes we don't clarify it to them, but we need to clarify to them that God is not in need of us. We are in need of God, right? That's why, sometimes the atheist has this perspective, if God was to come in front of me, then I will think about whether I want to believe in him, and I'll think about whether I want to worship him. We take this arrogant position. God doesn't need you to worship him. If once you realize you have the need to know God and to worship him, and that's the way to success, then, and you turn to God, then he will turn to you. But you have to make that first move, and yeah, you're right. You don't have to worship God. That's what free will means. You can choose not to worship God. But if you choose not to do it, then you are choosing your destiny. So if you end up on the day of judgment facing the hellfire, then that's your choice, and no one else is to blame except yourself. So, and that's as simple as that.
So someone asked how life started. Does Islam ignore evolution and discoveries? So that's basically the question. So does Islam? Okay. I know that we're not going to discuss evolution and everything, but you can just give try to give a brief answer.
Quick summary. Okay. Yeah. So from the orthodox Islamic position, which I believe is the most sound in regards to evolution or human evolution. So when it comes to animal evolution and the evolution of other living creatures, God knows best. We don't know. God doesn't say anything in regards to how they evolved as the Darwinian mechanism or the Darwinian theory of evolution tells us. We don't know, right? When it comes to human evolution, and again, God knows best, from the way we understand it from an orthodox perspective, is that God created Adam with his own hands. Now, again, there's a whole discussion here and how this is to be understood and interpreted, etc. But we don't need to go into this. The key thing we need to understand here is this. If we assume and understand or say that God created the humans specially and separately from all other creatures, first thing we need to appreciate, this is not hard for God to do. Because God is all powerful. He's able to do all things. So if he chose to create a new being separately from all other creatures, then he can easily do this. God says be and it is. It doesn't tire him, or it's not burdensome upon God to do something, right? So that's the first thing. It's very easy for God to do. And from an Islamic perspective, it's completely internally coherent, as we would say. Meaning, if we understand God is all powerful, then there's no problem. God can do this, and God could do many other things, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the current most well-established model from a purely scientific perspective is the Darwinian mechanism, right? Which is the Darwinian model of evolution that human beings evolved. Now, something to appreciate here. Firstly, within the discipline of science, there are many other models in regards to evolution. The Darwinian mechanism is just one model. If you want a more detailed explanation on this, I would really recommend Subur Ahmed's videos for you to go and watch in regards to this. He goes into a lot more detail that covers this. But something we need to understand here is that even if, according to science, the best theory or model they have at the moment is Darwinian mechanism, which suggests that human beings evolved, fine. Remember, science doesn't deal with absolute facts. Science deals with what's most likely. If you go to any philosopher of science, they will tell you that if you were to ask them, is human evolution, is it 100% absolute fact scientifically? They would say no, because science doesn't deal with absolute facts. Science deals with what's most likely. Science is fluid. Science has had many paradigm shifts throughout history, right? So is the Darwinian mechanism 100% true? No. It's probably 90% true, 96% true, 95% true. Is there room for error? Sure there is. Is it possible that the scientists will change their mind in the next 5 or 10 years? Sure they will. It probably will happen. Maybe will happen. So we need to realize science doesn't deal with absolute facts. What we have is from Allah, and it's absolute. This is the revelation of God. So if you're a scientist and you work in the field of science, you can work with the model. There's no problem. You can accept the Darwinian mechanism and work with it when you're working as a scientist. But do you believe it as far as your theology is concerned? No, you don't have to believe it, right? So there's no contradiction here. So what you need to understand is what's from Allah is absolute. What's from science is it's what you would refer to as, how would you say in English? It's something that's not based on absolutes or 100% fact. You don't see it like that. It's just it's what's most likely according to the way they've interpreted the data that's at hand at the moment. That's it. And therefore it's up for revision and up for change in the near future.
Okay. Just to finish up with some of the questions. So one person basically, I mean, he's quoting some verses from the Quran, and he's asking if we can find, basically what he wants to know, is there any basis for the Big Bang theory in the Quran?
One thing I'll generally say again, so remember the Quran is now not a book of science, right? Because one of the things that has happened in the past century or so is this whole idea of scientific miracles has become very popular, and Muslims have been pushing this a lot too. I would say one thing we need to realize, once you understand the philosophy of science and you realize science doesn't deal with absolutes, and science is always up for change and it's always up for revision and it's fluid, then we can't claim scientific miracles. Because for us to claim a scientific miracle in the Quran, or to say that, look, the Quran speaks about Big Bang, or the Quran speaks about embryology, two things have to happen. The ayah, the verse of the Quran that you're linking the theory to has to be, you have to say that the interpretation of this verse is only X, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But if you study exegesis or the principles of exegesis, the usul of tafsir, one thing you realize is that you can't say that a particular verse only means this, right? We know that there are some verses in the Quran which have 5 interpretations or 6 interpretations or 10 interpretations. There's a scope of interpretations. So you can't take one of these types of verses and you can't say that this particular verse only means this. You can't do this. You can say it may mean this, or it may have this other interpretation. The other thing you have to do is you have to take that scientific, quote unquote, scientific fact. We know it's not absolute facts. It's just fact with a small f. And you have to say that this particular thing, such as the Big Bang, is an absolute fact. And you know you can't say this when you look at the philosophy of science. So therefore you can't claim scientific miracles. But what you can say is, look, this is something the Quran mentions, and one of the interpretations is very interesting because it's in line with our current understanding of the world. You can say this, we can say this, right? And when you look at the Quran like this, you will find some very, very amazing things. You will find some amazing things that Allah mentions. And when you read them and you look at what scientists are telling us currently, there's a lot of correlation there. There's a lot of interesting parallels there. But to claim it a scientific miracle is going too far. And we don't want to do this, because when we do this, what we're doing, in other words, we're setting the Quran up to fail. And many of the atheists are pointing this out, and they're rightly so done this. They've rightly pointed out, because science has changed its views in regards to certain things. And now what you're going to say, the Quran is wrong. So we have to remember that the Quran was never intended to be a book of science. It's a book of guidance, and therefore it may mention natural phenomenon. It will talk about the natural world. It'll talk about the signs of Allah. But when it talks about these things, you have to realize it's not talking about these things from a purely reductionist type of empirical perspective. It's talking about these things from a spiritual perspective. It's getting us to reflect upon these things from a spiritual dimension, not a scientific dimension.
Okay, great. One person basically said, to what extent does God have control over us, and in what sense do we have free will? I mean, I know this is like an essay.
Yeah, this is an age-old question. This is one. By the way, this was, as far as I'm aware, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, bro. This was the first point of contention that was brought into Islam from the philosopher types in our history.
Yes.
This was one of the biggest things, because when some of the Muslims were influenced by Greek philosophy, this was one of the first things that came into it. The relationship between free will and predestination.
The Qadariya basically sect. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And there's a lot of discussion in regards to this. Now, again, first thing I would say, this falls back on that principle I mentioned before. There are certain things that are beyond us. There are certain things we'll never fully grasp, right? Now, let me just try to get us to appreciate why this is one of those things we'll never fully understand. When it comes to us as human beings, we are temporal beings, meaning we are beings which are created within this material physical existence. And therefore, we are created within this material framework, which is governed by time in a particular way. So when we see time, it flows for us in a particular way, right? So we're here today, and we are moving towards the towards the future. So time for us is linear. We're moving in this direction in time, right? And therefore, we have history, and then we have present, and then we have the future. And we're bound by this, bro. We can't escape this. This is our world, right? Therefore, our ability to understand and conceptualize and have knowledge is bound by this reality, right? When it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know Allah is the creator of this dimension and this reality. Allah is not bound by it, right? God is not bound by time. Therefore, for God, past, present, future, it's all there. It's all there in a way we can't even imagine, right? Unlike for us, we're here in the present. We can't go to the future, right? We can't go to the past. We're temporal beings. We're limited by time, which is it flows in a linear fashion. Now, understanding that God is not bound by these things, therefore, we're talking about two realms here: the realm of human beings and the realm of God. And there's nowhere for us as limited human beings to be able to fully grasp both of these realms and how they overlay each other. There's no way of understanding this fully, right? It's impossible. From our perspective, certain things will seem contradictory because it's our limited perspective and our limited rational faculties. We can't transcend those. We can't cross those bounds. So from what God has told us, He is the one that knows everything. He is the one that's in control of everything. He is the one that has power over everything. And He is the one that's determined everything, right? Everything is under the control of God. But God has told us that we have free will. Now, how us having free will overlays God's predestination is beyond us. We will never fully grasp this unless and until we can grasp the realm of God, which we can never do, right? It's impossible for us to do. And unless we can do this, if we could do this, then we can have this conversation. But until and unless we can understand the realm of God and experience it, we can never understand how these two realities merge. All we can do from our limited human perspective is trust what God has said, because God does not lie. And if God has told us we have free will and we are to exercise it from our perspective, we have to do this, right? And we can do this. So I could choose to pick up this book and I could choose to put it down, right? So I've picked this book up now and I put it down. From my perspective, this has been my free will in exercise. And now that what I just did there has become history. It's become a part of history. But to God, God knew it and he had determined I would do this, right? How this overlays, Allah knows best, as we say. God knows best. And that's where we realize our limitations and we be humble from this perspective, right? But I think if we understand what I've said about the realm of humans and the realm of God, this should at least allow us to better appreciate the rationale behind what I'm saying, right? And help us better appreciate the limits of the human being, inshallah. If we can do that, that's sufficient.
I mean, and also intuitively, you basically know that you have a free will. Basically, you can choose whatever you want. I mean, you don't need anyone to tell you. I mean, you can't claim that someone is controlling you. I mean, there are, let's say, some of, are deeds that are basically done out of reflexes. For example, when you shiver, you can't control that. I mean, that's just a biological, limit that you have.
Yes.
Okay. I mean,
bro, it's not a problem. This is not a problem for Islam, bro. If anything, from our perspective, we can comprehensively highlight why it's beyond us. But this is a problem for the atheists and secularists too, bro. If you look at modern philosophy, one of the biggest things in discussion is the relationship between free will and determinism, right? So it's a big discussion even outside the realm of Islam and religion, amongst the sort of secular philosophers too. They can't solve this problem, right? So this is a general problem across the board. It's not if anything, Islam gives a comprehensive way of at least understanding why we can't understand it. Whereas from a secular perspective, you can't even do that. It's just a problem.
So basically, just two more questions. So the first question is, what are the best ways to convince and disprove an atheist with Quran and logic?
The best thing when I approach atheists is, for me, it's very simple. I wouldn't even go into logic. I think it's more simpler. Just remind the atheist, look, when you claim atheism, what you're saying is that there is no God. Everything is an accident. You are an accident. And everything you believe, you feel, you think is an accident. Your rational faculties are an accident. Your emotions are an accident. Your moral values and duties are an accident. Everything is an accident. How does that feel? Is that in line with your nature? And an honest, sincere person, at the very least, will make them think, no, I am a moral being. My life is valuable. I have meaning. I am a rational human being. I can think. I can understand. But atheism as a worldview, you know what it does? It strips you from being able to account for those things that make you human. And that's the biggest problematic aspect of atheism. And that's something most atheists, like the new atheists such as Richard Dawkins, don't like to talk about, because they know this is a big problem. And that's how I'd get atheists to reflect. I'll say, look, atheism, it strips you from the things that make you human. Why would you hold on to such a worldview? I mean, it strips you from being able to account for your rational faculties. How do you make sense of ordered rational faculties on atheism? You can't, So I would speak to them like that, and I'll just get them to understand how atheism, if you follow through with atheism, the implications it has on their life.
Okay. So the last question is somewhat, funny. So one brother asked, ask him if he knows where Bosnia is geographically.
It's I know it's in southern Europe, isn't it? Southern Europe, as far as I'm aware. But my geography is terrible, bro. I'll be very honest. I don't know where. I don't know. I don't really know where Manchester is. No, I'm joking. But to be honest, my geography is terrible. But I do know it's in Europe. It's in southern Europe, and that's pretty much it, bro. I've not been there. To be honest, the only parts of Europe I've been to is France, and where else have I been? We've been to Italy, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. So what there's been a lot of really, really great comments also on some of your points that you made. Some of the atheists have also written that that they are very pleased with your answer, and also one person has donated and basically said that he follows you on social media, on YouTube, and that he's very pleased that I've invited you to this discussion or this short Q&A. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, bro. Thank you for being my guest.
One more thing, if you don't mind, just quickly.
Yeah,
if I
okay.
share. two things. So for the atheists that are watching this, please carry on watching this channel because Brother Alim is going to be putting out some amazing content, inshallah. Also, definitely pick up a copy or a translation of the Quran and read it for yourselves. And trust me, when you read it for yourselves, you will see that a lot of things you've heard about Islam have been wrong. Yeah, so read it for yourselves. The only other thing I would say, if you want more content and more detailed answers in regards to some of the stuff we've discussed here today, there's two resources I can share with you. Number one is Sapiens Institute. So that's sapiensinstitute.org. If you go to the website, we have free webinars that we're doing currently, which talk about these topics, but go into a lot more detail. And also, if you go to my channel, Epistemics, you'll get shorter videos on these topics as well, inshallah.
Okay, just let me, I forgot totally. I mean, that's so irresponsible. Epistemics.
You can, and share the Sapiens link as well, bro, because I think that will be really helpful for people, inshallah, that want to study this stuff further.
Just give me a second, please. So your channel is this. So the brother's channel is this. And the Sapiens, how did you say Sapiens?
So it's Sapiens Institute. I'll give you the spelling now. So it's
I've got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Sapiensinstitute.org, inshallah.
Oh, but it's written together, right?
Yeah, together, and then .org.
.org, okay. And everything is together without any...
It's all there, bro. So if you go to, for example...
it doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't open.
Sapiensinstitute.org?
No, it does not.
How did you spell it? So it's SAPIENCE. It's spelled like that. Yeah. I know there's two ways of spelling it. It's two different words.
SAPIEN.
IENCE. Yep.
CE.
Yep. So SAPIENCE Institute.org.
Okay, I can see. Okay, just give me a second. Just to link it so the people can visit the website.
Yep. So if on the website,
okay, yeah, I'm in. So
the website is this. They could go to Learn, and under Learn there's webinars, and they can register for the webinars that have started. Just started actually last week.
Oh, great, okay. So, bro, thank you for your time. I mean, it's been a blast. I hope that this is not our last encounter, and that we're gonna, inshallah ta'ala, collaborate in the future.
Inshallah, bro. Inshallah, definitely. We'll be really good to do more of these, and maybe specific topics we can go into more detail as well, inshallah.
Yeah, of course. So just let me give an outro in Bosnian. So, okay. Hvala braćo i sestre, hvala što ste bili tu, Allah vas nagradio. Sad samo da ugasim svetla i to, znate sami kako ide ovaj drill. I vidimo se inshallah ta'ala u sljedećem live, u sljedećem videu. Allah vam dao svako dobro, pretplatite se na ovaj kanal ako još niste, pogledajte ove linkove koje sam stavio ovdje i vidimo se. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.